So today I want to talk about an organisation called Policy Exchange, and I'm aware that half of my viewers have already nodded off because Policy Exchange, two of the dullest, least intriguing words that you could call your organisation. You might as well call your organisation, these are not the droids you're looking for. So let me help you figure out whether or not you need to care about who Policy Exchange are. So I first heard about Policy Exchange, weirdly enough, when they asked me to go and speak at an event that they were holding. And I had never heard of them, so I said, oh, what's the fee? And they said, oh, there's no fee, but we'll just take you out for a really fancy meal afterwards. And that is the first sign of an organisation run by extremely wealthy people who don't know the value of money, because the idea that you can work in exchange for posh food, I mean, it's totally valid if you happen to have an estate that gives you a regular income, or perhaps some non-executive directorships of big companies. If you have a regular income from your family heirloom wealth, then you literally can go and work in return for caviar and treats and posh food. But if you're a normal person, you need to work for money so that you can pay your bills. You can't just go and work in return, for foie gras. So I said, no, I need a fee, and they agreed to pay me a fee. I went to this event, and when I got there, there was just a room full of people dripping wealth, just expensive Savile Row tailored suits, cut glass accents, tweed, just incredibly, incredibly posh people, and incredibly right-wing people. I don't think I've ever felt quite so cornered and surrounded by extremely right-wing people in my life. And bear in mind that I have been a guest on the Katie Hopkins radio show. They'd billed it as a debate about free speech, and it couldn't have been less of a debate. Right, I tried to make what I thought was sensible, nuanced points about free speech being a really important human right, and at the same time, the difficulty of making sure that in fighting for free speech, we weren't creating a licence for hate speech and abuse and incitement to violence, and all that kind of stuff, which can sometimes happen. And it felt like there was a conversation to be had about how we draw lines and what we allow, what we don't allow, what's the right way to figure these things out. But everybody else in the room was of the opinion that this nonsense about just we need free speech. It's gone. One guy during the question and answer section just got up and said, "Well, free speech is terrible these days. I know people who are embarrassed to admit they're Zionists." That's not quite the same as free speech having died, mate. I mean, yes, you wear a Nazi uniform on the 73 bus, people will look at you funny. Doesn't mean that free speech has died, does it? But who are Policy Exchange? Well, they're a think tank. They seek to write papers and influence government policy, and on their own website they produced this amazing graphic describing what they do. And I know it's quite confusing and you can't necessarily make head nor tail of it, but I'll give you some detail from it. Right, in this graphic they claim credit for all sorts of stuff that has become government policy over the years. The big one would be this one. In 2009, they published a paper called Controlling Public Spending, The Scale of the Challenge, advocating draconian austerity measures in terms of public spending. And in 2010, the coalition government brought in the austerity programme, which the British Medical Journal says has led to 120,000 excess unnecessary deaths over the following 7 years. In 2012, they wrote a paper about gas exploration, and they claim credit thereafter when the Labour Party removed their moratorium on fracking from its manifesto, and the same year the government reduced restrictions on fracking, meaning that fracking could go ahead in the UK. Earlier this month they called Extinction Rebellion extremists and tried to link them to terrorism. They've been behind the introduction of free schools. They've advocated for more academies where teachers don't need to be fully qualified. Class sizes are expanding. The private sector is making a profit out of running public schools with unaccountable standards. So you might be wondering, who funds this organisation? In 2017, we know their income was around £3.5 million. And Interestingly enough, first of all, we don't know where that money's coming from. There's an organisation called Transparify who seek to expose how transparent or otherwise organisations are in terms of their funding. And they published a report on think tanks with a particular kind of focus on the UK. And they ranked the major UK think tanks in order of how transparent they are in terms of who's funding them. And here's that table that they produced, and you'll spot Policy Exchange. It's, hold on, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Yeah, it's right at the very, very bottom. It's like the worst one. It's below the Institute of Economic Affairs. It's just at the bottom. It's below all of the others, below the Adam Smith Institute. It's the worst one. We know a tiny bit about where their funding comes from because they organised events this year at both the Labour and Conservative Party conferences, and some of those events were sponsored by a company called Drax. No, not this one. Drax is an energy company that's currently trying to build a large gas-powered power station in Yorkshire. You know, the sort of power station that literally would not be viable if we didn't have fracking going on right across the north of England. That sort of thing. And the amazing thing is that their 3.5 million annual income is not taxed. Why not? Because they list themselves as an educational charity. And in order to justify calling themselves an educational charity, they have to be seen to be politically neutral. Now, bear in mind, they were founded by Michael Gove, so they don't sound all that politically neutral to me. This year, they organised 16 events at the Conservative Party conference and 8 at the Labour Party conference, and then they cancelled all 8 at the Labour Party conference. So they did 16 events at the Conservative conference, including ones funded by the Drax Energy Company, and none at the Labour Party conference, and they call themselves a charity. Which means that the next time you see this image, weirdly enough, the most nauseating thing in it will no longer be Boris Johnson. Sorry about that.